So welcome to the last Thunderbird Thursday. The topic we were talking about is reflection reflex. Just as a reminder, my name is Georgia Peary. I use she, her pronouns. I am the club's program leadership advisor. Um, and yeah, this is our last Thunderbird Thursday of the academic year. So I think just really quick, if you could use your reaction feature if you went to the first Thunderbird Thursday that we had all the way back on October 1st, maybe raise your hand or put in the chat that you were there. I see Min gave a thumbs up. If I missed someone's reaction, I'm sorry. Maya also raised her hand. And I think this is a little too ironic is I was reflecting on that we started the year with a Thunderbird Thursday. I also got to kind of host that one. Now we get to end the year all together again. And if this is your first Thunderbird Thursday, also we are so happy to have you here. And we're gonna get into a little bit of things before we get started. So first, Lupe put in the chat, we would really appreciate if you checked in, letting us know who's here, who's in the room with us. We would really appreciate it. And that link is in the chat if you don't already have it. Live transcript should be on. I thought I turned it on, but I will double check that. Or maybe if one of my handy co-hosts can do that. Is that a co-host power? That's okay. I didn't turn it on. Okay. There you go. So auto transcription is on. If it's also distracting to you and you don't need it, you feel free to turn it off. I also just wanted to acknowledge that, yes, this is our last one, and we've done a whole year of virtual leadership programming for you. So I just want to thank you all for showing up today. It was kind of weird to think that we've done a whole year of this now. And I remember in the summer as a leadership programming team, we were like, oh, we kind of want to do a structured workshop every month. And we planned out each topic every month for you all. And so it's interesting that we got to the bottom of that list. So I just want to celebrate that a little bit. And then we'll head into our land acknowledgement. So we would now like to collectively take a moment to acknowledge Indigenous and First People of the land and space in which we live and breathe. For our community at Highland College, we recognize that we are on occupied Duwamish, Coast Salish, Muckleshoot, and Puyallup lands. And we want to thank all relations and tribes today as we prepare to hold space as a community. We recognize that we are all joining this conversation from different areas. So we also invite you to reflect and thank Indigenous and First People of the land and spaces in which you are coming from. I also want to empower you all later in the workshop. As no surprise, we're going to actually have you actively reflect. And if this is something that you want to actively reflect on, well, whose land you're on, then I really encourage you to do so. And as always, we're going to introduce ourselves. We do have a new person, a new human part of the team. And so I want to make sure she also has some time and space to introduce yourself. But I'll go first again. My name is Georgia Peary, she, her pronouns, club's leadership advisor. And I'm going to popcorn to Malay Lupe.
What's up, family? My name is Malay Lupe, also go by Lupe, he, him pronouns. I am the interim international engagement leadership advisor. I'm going to popcorn to Amy.
Hi everyone, Amy Bergstrom, she, her pronouns, and I am the programming and marketing leadership advisor in the Center for Leadership and Service. And I think he's here, at least he was before. So Gio, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, I'll be here for a little bit before my meeting, but hi everyone, my name is Gio Panello and I am the mentorship programs leadership advisor. And also, I don't know where y'all got that Bitmoji of me, but that's cute.
I stole it from somewhere.
Oh, am I supposed to popcorn it to someone?
Yes, please.
Oh, Nicole, since I don't, Edwin is not here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole. My Bitmoji did not get added. It was too last minute, but it was a picture of me sitting in a coffee cup because that is my life. But I'm an intern with Highline, so I'm so happy to be with the CLS and CCIE teams and excited to just share space with you all. I'm a second year student at Seattle University.
think that is everyone. Yeah, Edwina, she is not here. She is doing some cool things for Pacifica Heritage Month. So she is off educating others in other spaces, and we miss her, but she's also doing amazing work. And so also look out for your email for more announcements about Pacifica Heritage Month, because I believe Highline is hosting week 3. So you'll see more events coming soon. So check your email. All right. I'm gonna pass it on to Amy.
Okay, thank you, Georgia. So if you were not aware, Thunderbird Thursday, our monthly leadership workshops, are a part of the Connect program. And the Connect program is really just our way of engaging students from across Highline College. Of course, my phone starts ringing as I'm talking. In leadership opportunities. And so we're really trying to provide opportunities for students, no matter what your level of engagement with leadership has been up to this point, to build skills, confidence, and also to make connections with other student leaders. So Lupe, thank you, has posted in the chat a link to the Connect program webpage. So that's just if you were kind of curious what this was all about. It will be back again. I'm going to just go ahead and say it will be back again next year. We'll, we always take the opportunity over the summer to figure out what we want it to look like, but there will be some kind of form of the Connect program. So if you're going to be back at Highline next year, there'll be additional opportunities for you to engage. But if you have participated this year, including at this workshop right now, you can reflect on your experience with the different workshops that you've participated in. And if you submit 5 programs before the end of this month, you can be recognized with a leadership certificate at our Final Say program, which is our end of year leadership celebration in June. So take a look at that website, and then also the form that is where you can actually log your participation in events. And if you did events earlier this year, go ahead, you can log past events. There's no like time, hey, it's been too many months since that event happened. So today with our reflection reflex, just really simple learning outcomes for today, but I think that's sort of in the spirit of really what this concept of reflection is all about. And so one of the reasons why we named it Reflection Reflex is because we want to explore just how you already use reflection, the reflex that's already in you to be thinking and reflecting. But then if you are kind of still trying to figure out what reflection looks like for you, some of the different modes of reflection that you could incorporate into your life and practices. And so as we get started, we have a few community agreements that we always like to establish when we're working together. And so our agreements for today are: take care of yourself. We know it is week 5 of the quarter. We are at really the heart of busyness, and spring quarter is busier than other quarters. And we were all just talking about that before the event started. So do what you need to do as you're engaging in this space. We really encourage you to engage as fully as possible, but you can do that in the way that makes sense to you. Make sure you have water. There'll be times where we encourage you to have your camera on, but if you need to have your camera off, that's okay too. So whatever it is that you need to do to take care of yourself and be aware of how you are experiencing this workshop today. Use I statements. So when we have opportunities for discussion or to talk with others, that we don't speak for any other people or for entire communities, but we really just talk about our own experiences. And so use I statement when you're sharing about something from your own experience. Don't yuck my yum. So the idea of this is to not just say something negative about something that's positive for other people if it's not productive to the conversation. So it's okay to have constructive conversations. If someone says something and you don't quite agree with it, that's fine. But if it's really just, I don't like that for something that someone else likes, that's really what we mean. We're like yucking my yum. So we just encourage you, don't yuck other people's yums. One diva, one mic. That means we are going to just have one person who's speaking at a time. And when it's an opportunity to share, that we take turns and allow folks to finish speaking if they're sharing something. Impact over intent. This means that the impact or the consequences of the things that we say is more important even than what we intended when we were saying those things. And so you might say something, and if it is hurtful to someone else or just makes someone else uncomfortable or those kinds of things, even if you didn't mean for that to happen, just being aware of the potential impact of some of the things that you're sharing and owning when those impacts can be harmful to other people. Silence is okay. Especially as we get into talking about reflection, there are probably going to be some times when there's a little bit of silence. And especially on Zoom, I think that can be a little uncomfortable. It seems like extra silence in that space, but we are leaving room for that in this workshop in particular. And if there are spaces where you've asked a question and you're really thinking about it, it's okay to let others think about it as well before we fill in. But kind of to go along with that, we'll also say step up and step back. And so the idea of step up and step back is if you're someone who maybe tends to be more keeping your thoughts to yourself, not sharing within the group, then we're going to challenge you to think a little bit about stepping up and sharing in various spaces. And if you're someone who maybe shares a lot and very frequently, and you feel like instantly you have an answer to something, that maybe taking a pause and stepping back and letting others share their thoughts before you do. So those are agreements. Before we move on, is there anything that anyone wants to add on to those, or questions you have about any of those agreements? Okay, well then we will move along. I think I'm done, right?
Yes, thank you, Amy. So now we're going to get into the, for lack of a better word, meat of the reflection workshop. And so I thought I would just start us off. Me doing this reminded me of, like, you know, when you were first and maybe in grade school, getting used to doing presentations, and you like to start off with like the Merriam-Webster definition of what you're talking about. And so I was like, I wonder what Google has to say about what reflection is. And also I got that it's this thing in physics, like light reflecting off other things. I was like, oh yeah, it is actually a scientifical scientifical is not a word, but scientific concept. But when I kind of had to delve deeper, and in the term of how we're talking about reflection, Google likes to say that it's serious thought or consideration. So I think for someone like myself, who sometimes really hard for me to reflect because I think it's this big, deep thing, it's something I sometimes want to avoid. I kind of like this very succinct, straightforward definition. It's just giving serious thought or consideration to something. So you don't have to spend a ton of time on it. You can, and that's great. But it's also something that you're actually probably doing every day. It's a reflex already. You know, maybe it is someone said something in one of these workshops, or your instructor said something, and you're giving it some serious thought. You're reflecting on what they said. So just keep that mindset in mind. Are you gonna let me switch there we go. And then I have to laugh at my own word jokes. I don't know what they're really called. But we're gonna do some reflection inception. So we're gonna ask you to reflect on reflection. So these two questions: do you use reflection in your leadership? Because as we all know, as we've been saying all year, you're already all leaders. Whether you think so or not, I think you're all leaders. And so how are you using your reflection in leadership? And if I could actually have someone type these in the chat before, because we're going to send you into some breakout rooms. So I want to make sure that they are in the chat. And the second question is, when is reflection hard? When is it hard for you? Is it hard? Maybe it's not hard for you, and that's fine. Maybe you're like me and it's really hard. It's something you like to avoid. And so we're going to send you in some breakout rooms. I want to say, if you need a few minutes before you start chatting in those breakout rooms, that's obviously totally fine. If you end up in those breakout rooms and no one says a word because you're reflecting on these answers, that's great. And so I'm going to send you off. Any questions about these questions before we send you off? No? Okay. Give me a second. Hello all, welcome back. I hope that breakout room maybe broke the ice or you got to really think about these questions. So I'm gonna put it out there. Feel free to unmute yourself or put in the chat. You don't necessarily have to say your answer to those questions, but what was that experience like reflecting on reflection? So if anyone wants to be brave and unmute themselves or put things in the chat, let's just have a little group discussion. And also invite any pro staff to reflect on these questions and share out too.
I can go ahead and share. I thought my group had really great responses to both of the questions, but especially to question 2 in regards to when is reflection hard, because each of us had different responses, but I related to all of them. I was like, oh yeah, that's hard for me too. So that was cool.
Nice, thanks, Sam. Anyone else?
I would say for my response, like, yes, I definitely use reflection in my leadership, like thinking about what my values are, why I'm doing the work I do, even if it does get tiring sometimes in a virtual space, like what is the reason and root for all of this. And I feel like reflection is hard when I get burned out, like with assignments and just loading or with work or having to do all of that and not really taking the time to reflect and think about some of the things that I've done and what I want to do moving forward.
Thanks. Yeah, it sounds like reflection is a way for you to make meaning making out of like this whole year of all the work that you've done. Thanks. Anyone else want to share?
I'll share.
Go ahead, Johannes.
I think like reflection really becomes easier when you actually write it down on paper, but it's really hard when it comes to speaking out, especially on events.
So writing it down is much easier for you, right, Johannes?
Yes.
You lead us so well into our next little bit of this presentation. So claps for Johannes. And so next, I found this TED Talk. And Sakina Hoffler is a poet and an author, and she's going to share a little bit about how reflection for her, she uses creative writing as a form of reflection. So like Johannes, she puts pen to paper. And she'll say that reflection is a way of bearing witness. It's a way for her to really reflect on a situation or experience she had and then make meaning of it, kind of like how Maya also does. I do want to share, she's sharing experiences of her own as a Black Muslim woman living in New York. So if you've maybe shared experiences, have those shared identities, I want to give maybe a little bit of a trigger warning. So if you need to at any time, just step away from your computer, that's totally fine. That's why I wanted to just share that she's really going to say how she makes meaning of her experiences through reflecting and through her writing. So I'm going to go ahead and play. Let me know if the volume is too loud, too soft. I'm gonna give us maybe a minute or two, a few seconds of for us to just maybe bear witness to that video, and then I'm gonna open it up if people want to share their thoughts. And also feel free to use the chat if you don't want to unmute. All right. So anyone's general thoughts? I also want to thank Amy for putting the details of what she was saying in the chat. What did everyone think of this concept of reflection and specifically creative writing as a way of bearing witness? and especially like the steps that this author uses.
I can share. I actually love creative writing. It's something that I started doing when I was in high school. And so got into performing and writing. And it's something that for me is a wonderful outlet to kind of, I connected with what she was saying around like it makes it real. It can kind of take something that's an abstract thing that you experienced and you haven't given a lot of thought to, and it can make you really sit with it and think about what it was and what it meant and how it impacted you. So I think I just really connected with this video because of that.
Thanks, Nicole.
I can continue. I agree with Nicole. When you write down your reflection, it's like your thoughts became to be physical, and you kind of, your thoughts on a paper, and you can read these thoughts in the future, or just like sometimes it is very helpful to just go back to those days and just reflect on those feelings and negativity or any other positive things. It can be different reflection, right? So it's just so helpful to remember, not just remember, because the thoughts always go and gone, So when it's physically on the paper, it's really helpful to remember what was in your thoughts. And as a she mentioned as a story, right? It was really helpful sometimes just to reflect on some situation in your life or someone else's life too.
Thanks, Alona. Yeah, I think I'm someone who putting pen to paper isn't something I do very often. So I really appreciate how because to me, storytelling can sometimes seem like this big thing, even though I love telling stories. But when she broke it down into focus on the details, order of events, and how it made you feel. And then when she ends up telling her story, she obviously weaves it so well that you don't even realize she's doing 1, 2, 3. And I think when we get into reflection, that like happens. You like don't realize you're doing these bullet points, but you're following steps and it's turning into this way of bearing witness. Anyone else have any thoughts on the video? All right. So we're just going to move into our next section. There we go. So I'm not going to keep talking because you don't need to hear me keep talking. What I really wanted to do is look to my coworkers to see how they reflect. And I think this is something that if you're in a team, you rely on your team a lot. And so I'm open about reflection being hard for me. It's not my go-to, but I wanted to hear and have them share with you. So I welcome Nicole. I have a few questions. And I just got a notification that my internet is unstable. So if I freeze, enjoy freeze frame Georgia. But I have 3 questions. You all can answer each question if you feel moved to. If you don't feel moved to answer a question, that's totally fine. And I will type the questions or have someone copy paste them in the chat for me, just so that we can also read them. So my first question to the rest of LPT and Betty and Nicole is, when did you first realize the importance of reflection in your own leadership style?
I can start. So I think that I've always been a reflective person in my own just like way of being. Especially when I was younger, I had like just notebooks that, I don't know, I feel like the teenage years were the years where I like go in my room and I just write stuff in notebooks and, you know, all of that, the angst. But I don't know that I like called it reflection, right? I don't think that I was like, oh, I'm going to go off and reflect for a while, right? It was just sort of like, oh, this is my experience, I'm going to write. Or even just, this is something that I'm dealing with, I'm going to go write about it for a while. And then I think I lost it a little bit as an adult. But then Georgia and I, and actually Nicole is also in this grad program sorry, I was in a grad program in the past. Georgia also was in that grad program. Nicole is currently in that grad program that has a really big emphasis on reflection, where like in our classes, we would often have to do reflective papers. There was often the last 10 minutes of a class session would be reflection on that session. So it was very much integrated into that process. And I think since then, that has really helped me kind of like formalize the concept of reflection in my own leadership. One thing I want to say also just from that video, that even just in the last few minutes, my thinking has shifted a little bit, is I think I tend to think of reflection as like a personal, it's like about me and my thoughts and, you know, how do I process that personally, which that's not wrong. It's not that. But I think this video really made me think about how the act of reflection helps tell a story that like can impact the greater community. And so like, I don't know, that helped me think about reflection, not just being personal, but actually being communal too. So.
Oh, go ahead, Nicole. Kind of going off of what Amy was saying, I think when I first realized like that I was really reflecting is when I started to think about the stories that we carry. And like Amy was saying, we don't just carry our own stories, we carry other stories. So we carry our ancestor stories, we carry the stories of those around us. We even carry the stories of those who aren't around us or are in our close proximity. So reflect, I'm sorry, y'all. So making sure to reflect on those stories and reflect on everything that you may be funneling in your body is really important, because you may not realize that it's affecting you in a way that it is. Y'all, it's a mess back here. But I will leave it at that.
Yeah, shout out to you, because if my kid was here, I would not be on here. But I think I already kind of talked about how important reflection is, but I think for me, it was kind of an informal thing in the beginning, right? Like Amy was kind of talking about, it was something that I did, but I wasn't intentionally reflecting. I was just reflecting, right? And so I think for me, I come from a family of like songwriters and poets. And so we like to write. And so that was something that has always been central to kind of just how we are. Like we'll put it in a song, write it down, just something that we do. And that was something that I kind of brought in undergrad. I was like really involved on campus, and I was like a Black Student Union president. And I was like, we need to like think about who we are and how we're entering the space. And that's kind of where I really got into reflection. And then also, of course, when I went to the SDA program, and I hated it in the beginning because they were always like, let's stop and reflect. I'm like, I don't feel like it. I want to go home now. I'm done. We did the work. But they would really push you to kind of think, because it's a really central element for you as you develop and as you integrate who you are personally with like your professional and academic aspirations. Like, how is the person that I am influencing the work that I do? And that's kind of how reflection plays into my work these days.
I'm a reflective person too. And that's just, I like to write, take notes on things, and even if it doesn't make sense at the time, like I just write it down so that I don't forget. But in terms of leadership, I think reflecting or like having some kind of debrief after events or programs became intentional and became important to me, because I noticed like we're making the same mistakes every time. So like why aren't we going back to like talk about those things? And so that's how I knew like reflection was really important as a group. We have major events, really just to see like what went well, what, especially when you're in volunteer work and like you have limited resources and energy, you want to make sure you're making the most impact with the least, without like burning out. And so debriefing or reflection is really important to me for that reason.
Thanks, Lupe. You also segue us perfectly into the next question. So you kind of already answered it, but if you want to elaborate, I empower you to do so. How do you use reflection in your current role?
I guess I can continue. So I love just breaking it down into like, obviously having a discussion with the people involved, or asking questions like, what went well, or what was something that we want to keep doing, and then what are some of the things that we know didn't work and we need to stop doing. And also like going back to our objectives, or what are some of the things that we wanted to have happen at this event or this program, and seeing if we met those benchmarks, and if not, what happened.
I think similarly for me, especially during the pandemic, right? Like when everything first hit, it was like, we need to just go virtual and do everything that we already used to do virtual and just put it all on the screen. And then you had to really sit down and think about, is this actually effective? Should we be really adapting the things that we're doing, or should we just be throwing it on a computer screen? And so that was something that I really saw reflection become a part of that process of not only trying to figure out what are the learning outcomes that we want, but also like, why are we doing this? What are the students gaining from this? What are our teams gaining from this? And trying to be intentional about that. And then I think kind of to connect it back to one of those early questions about like, what's the hardest part about it? I think sometimes it's hard when you have to reflect on the things that you don't do well. It's way more fun to reflect on like your wins than your losses. So, sometimes you have to take that moment and be like, all right, this did not go great, or I did not approach this the best way, or I did not communicate this as effectively as possible. And that's kind of another piece where that reflection part is important, because if you're unable to reflect on your L's, you're not going to grow.
I'm going to jump in from that, Nicole, because I think that's so interesting what you just said about it being easier to reflect on what went well versus what didn't, because I think I tend to think about what didn't go well instead of what did go well. And so I always like when it's very similar to what Lupe said, like after an event, always like to do a what went well, what would we like to change, but like it's always important to me that we start with what went well, because like it's really easy for me to jump into the like, here are all the ways that we need to fix what didn't go well. And I think like one of the things too is we're all so busy, and that's like that's the story of our lives, that it's easy to just like keep going. And so I think it is really important that we take a time at the end of something that we've done, and we do have that like little bit of reflection as a group. We're like, even if it's just like, oh, I planned this thing, and so now I need to think about what went well, what I learned, what I'd like to change. But yeah, I've like kind of wrote a note to myself that I wanted to talk a little bit about. I think this is the right place to I personally have to like distinguish between reflection and rumination. And if anyone has ever heard the word ruminate, I only learned it probably a couple of years ago, and I have like clung to that word because it is so descriptive of the way my mind works, which rumination is basically where you take a single thought and you cycle it over and over again in your head. And it is often something that people, when you're experiencing anxiety, like that is like something that happens in folks' heads. And I'm very commonly deal with being a person who ruminates. And so for me, reflection actually is like an interrupter to that, because I will basically spend all night ruminating about something that happens in the past or just like earlier that day, and there's no like progress that's happening from that. It's just sort of like I'm just going to keep thinking about this and thinking about this. And so sometimes I have to be like, okay, like I'm going to take out a piece of paper and just write down the fact that this thing happened and how it made me feel and like what I want to do differently from there. And so for me, like reflection is a process of interrupting. And Lupe, I love that you have put some definitions in there. And I think actually that second one is kind of where the concept is. If you think about a goat or like a farm animal of some sort that's like chewing on something over and over again out in the pasture, like that's what you're doing with a thought. And you're not like that, they're not like swallowing that and like absorbing it. You're just like continuing to chew this thought, and that's not necessarily productive. So for me, that is really important, like part of being able to move past some of those challenging things.
I really hope everyone is quiet in my background this time. I was gonna say same, Amy, same. I think that rumination part is really important because I think that's where the imposter syndrome is really kicking in. And that's where I do that as well. I kind of ruminate on things, but then realize that it's not taking me anywhere. And as far as reflection in my current role, I also feel that I have to reflect on my own first before I reflect with others. To gather my thoughts, because I can't always maybe think as quick as other people. I just like to think of everything that went through or happened either at a program or in a conversation or at a meeting with someone before I begin to process with anyone else.
Oh, thank you all. That was awesome. So for the sake of time, I'm going to skip our last question, but the next slide will kind of maybe go over what our panelists were going to answer. And so I kind of wanted to give you all, what are some modes of reflection? Like we've been talking about this concept, but how can I actually do it? And that TED Talk really gave you creative writing is a possible outlet for that reflection. But here are just some lists. This is obviously not exhaustive. If there's something on that list you're like, actually, I do this already in reflection, please do so. And thank you, Lupe. I made a Google, my dog also wants to be part of this reflection activity, so we're just gonna ignore her. I made a reflection resources document, and you should be able to open it. Everyone should be able to open it. It has some links to some things. And so I believe, let's actually open it up because I want to look at it too. So this is the document you should be able to open. And a lot of these ideas came from the panelists. I reached out and okay, what's your go-to mode reflection? And they came back and sent me these. So I also linked the TED Talk if you want to go back and watch that again. Someone sent me bullet journaling. So I want to encourage, if you're a panelist who sent me this, if you want to chime in and maybe explain what that is a little bit. So does anyone want to explain bullet journaling to our students? I knew it was Lupe. I just was wondering if he was gonna. I knew it was you.
I was like, wait. So bullet journaling is, it's kind of like misconstrued because it's like journaling slash making lists of things that you need to get done and trying to prioritize things. And basically, if something with the system of bullet journaling, if something keeps on coming up and you're not getting it done, it just asks you to put it on the side and don't focus your energy on it. And so I like bullet journaling because I need to prioritize things that need to get done. I want to get done. I don't know if that made any sense. But also in the bullet journaling world, there's like YouTubers that do this online and get paid to show off their bullet journals. Like there's a lot of artsy people that I like, people that are calligraphers and artists that do watercoloring in their journals, which is great. But like I try to play around with my bullet journal, and sometimes I'll just write a word that is on my mind. And sometimes just writing out that word will lead to poetry. Sometimes it leads to just thoughts about things related to that word or things that are happening in my life. And so it's very therapeutic for me. So yeah.
Thanks, Lupe. And the next on the list was 1 sentence a day journal. And I'm going to call in Amy because this is her thing.
So 1 sentence a day, there's a lot of different, I shared just with Georgia one particular, it's like just literally the one that I own, but there's like hundreds, thousands probably of them out there. And it's really a blank journal, but it has a date at the top of it. And then, so you can get them for different amounts of time. Mine is a 5-year journal. And so it's January 1st through December 31st, but then each page has space for 5 years of content. And so they're very small. It's literally like you could write maybe 1 to 2 sentences in this space, but you go through, and so you start, well, I started in the middle of some random month or whatever, but you start January 1st, for example, and you write January 1st, 2021, you wrote a couple of sentences, you go through the whole year, and then you circle back again and you start January 1st, 2022, and it has last year's, like what you wrote on that day, and then you add another thought. And so I end my day with that. I usually just try and write something that stands out to me, whether that is an event that happened or just a feeling that I have. And then I really enjoy that I'm on my 2nd year with the same journal, that you come back to, oh, this is what happened. Like, it's especially having started it last year during the pandemic. It was like, oh, this was the last day I worked on campus, or, there's just lots of kind of things that come up through that.
And I don't know who sent this to you, but the Penzu free online journal, I thought this was really cool. So it's just a free, if for you pen and paper isn't effective, but you actually like using a keyboard, then that's like a free online journal, and it's completely private. So it's not like you're posting a blog and everyone can see it. So I thought that was really cool. And then shout out to Betty and Amy, because at last year's Winter Leadership Retreat, they led a session on journaling, and they gave me this list of journal prompts. So if you're like, I feel like I need to reflect on something, but I'm lost, or there's too many thoughts that I have that I want to reflect on, these are some prompts that you can use. So kind of like fill in the blank. Really similar to Sakina, of like a time when ... or when she was like, think about a time that you didn't speak up or intervene and maybe you should have. So those are these examples. So we're gonna flip back. And so just some tips when you're reflecting, try and unplug. So even if you're using the free online journal, maybe don't have any other tabs open. Still put your phone on airplane mode, just so you can really focus. Use ASMR or other music, soothing music, or white noise. I know when sometimes, this isn't when I'm reflecting, but when I'm working, I play like this YouTube on my TV, which is in my living room. And it's like of the rainforest. So I feel like I'm in the rainforest. I can hear rain, which I really love. And then if it's helpful for you, choosing a time of day or the week or the month to dedicate to reflection. So like Amy, she does it sounds like at the end of the day every day. Maybe you're like, oh, I cannot commit to doing it once a day. I'm not as cool as Amy, which I'll admit I'm not as cool as Amy. And so for me, it's maybe more once a week. Maybe it's Fridays at lunch. I think about what happened in the past week, or it's Monday mornings. I think my mind immediately does it Monday mornings. Oh, thanks. Maya, is that white noise that you like to use? I'm gonna call you in because you put something in the chat. Oh, nice. Okay, various audios. Thanks, Maya, for sharing the resource.
Oh, sorry. It has rain sounds, thunder, fire crackles, birds chirping, crickets, wind, waves. It has a nice variation, and you can like mix them together for how much you want.
That's so cool. I think what I'm actually going to do is I think the Google Doc that you all have access to is you can view it, but I'm going to make it so you all can edit it. And so it can be like a shared document that we all have. I just maybe if you're thinking about adding something and you're not sure, refer to our community agreements and just be like, is this going to be helpful for these other people? So yeah, I'd encourage you. I'm going to make that editable after this. And so with that, we're 3:45, we end at 4. I think it wouldn't be a reflection workshop if we didn't actually reflect and use your go-to method. And so what I've done is set up 3 different, it's reflection. We're gonna put reflection in action. I've set up 3 different breakout rooms, and this is the type of breakout room where you can choose which one you go to. So I didn't do a ton. There aren't all the go-to methods, but I thought of 3 maybe more common ways of reflecting. And so the first room is free writing. So if you already have a topic that you feel like you want to reflect on or draw about, or like she said in the video, maybe write a Wikipedia article. I thought that was kind of a cool way of doing it. I would encourage you to choose the first room. And so there might be other people in the room, but everyone's going to be quiet, your mics are going to be off, and your cameras are optional in that room. Second one is, say you need a prompt. So this room's also going to be writing, drawing, whatever creative way you want to put pen to paper or on an online journal. You're going to follow that like fill in the blank prompts that are on that document. So you're going to choose one and reflect on that in whatever mode is best. And then I also wanted to make some space for those external processors. I think I'm also one of these people who sometimes I like to talk things out. And so spoken reflection is also going to be a breakout room. So if you want to reflect with other people, I spelled quiet wrong. It says not quite, but I meant quiet. You don't have to be quiet in this room. I will turn our attention back to one of our community agreements of 1 mic, 1 diva though. So if someone is sharing, giving them that space, not interrupting until they're done. And you can have your cameras on or off, but your mics should be on. So any questions before we go into breakout rooms? We're going to give you 10 minutes of reflecting. Any questions before we send you off though? Okay, I'm going to open them and you'll get, I'm actually stop sharing my screen so it's helpful for you to see maybe. I'm going to open them and you should get a notification to like join a breakout room on the bottom right of your screen. Hi all, welcome back. I hope that was helpful and you got to maybe explore a reflection, a mode of reflection that you are already comfortable with or that you've never tried before. And so I'm not going to ask you to share out in a big group. I think there's only so much reflection you can do, and we've been doing it for an hour and a half. So think about that for a second. And so I'm going to pass it over. If Lupe doesn't mind just closing us out with some center announcements. I will share my screen here. All you, Lupe.
All right, so we have some events that are coming up. So this Friday, May 7th, we have an ICC event, Understanding Ableism. It's going to be happening from 11 a.m. to 12:30, and the meeting ID and passcode is on the screen. We also have on the same day, global film series from the Global Student Ambassadors, GSA, happening from 1 to 3. I'll put.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Sorry. I'll be posting the links in the chat. And then on May 10th, on Monday next week, the ICC featuring Amy will be holding a talk on sports and gender. And that'll be from 12 to 1:30. And the information is on the screen as well. Another announcement that didn't make the slide is Pacifica Heritage Month. So the month of May is Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And a few of us on the core team or on the pro staff in the core team are part of the Pacifica Heritage Committee. And so we'll be hosting some events in the third week of May. And so I'm going to be putting that in the chat as well. So thank you everyone for coming today. Pass it back to Georgia.
That's it. Just thanks for a great year. We've done, I think it's 8 Thunderbird Thursdays. Those went by really fast. So thanks for a great year. We're all really grateful for you all students, and we will see you at Final Say. Well, we'll see you at all the ICC events and Global Film Series, and we'll also see you at Final Say. So check your student email for announcement on that. But have a great rest of your day.